Cooper Cole is pleased to present Who Is This Song?, a solo exhibition of artworks by Kate Newby. This marks the artist's third solo exhibit at the gallery and features a new, site-responsive, large-scale sculptural ceramic installation paired with several ceramic wall murals.
Hi, my name is Kate Newby. I'm from Aotearoa, New Zealand, but I'm currently living and working in Texas, in San Antonio. This is my third solo presentation with Cooper Cole, and it's been about 5 or 6 years since I was here in Toronto, or Toronto, as I've been told to say. For my last exhibitions, I actually came to Toronto and worked here, worked with like a local clay studio at the university. I made the work in Simon's backyard. It was all made here because I love working site responsively. I like working kind of socially in a way. So this is quite a different exhibition for me. I have my first studio. I'm 45 years old. I've been doing my work for a really long time, but it's just been in the last year that I've finally got a studio. And I think that that has really changed how I've been working because there are kilns there. I work a lot with clay, and I've been able to kind of keep revisiting my work time and time again. So what we have here is we have 25 sculptures on the floor, and when I say revisiting, I mean like it'll come out of the kiln, I'll see it, and I'll think, oh, I can just keep refiring that. So some of these pieces have been fired like 7 times. I just kind of like keep firing them until I'm happy with the surface. And I know I'm happy with the surface when I don't really recognize it anymore. I feel like the effect that I want is something that I don't really know and don't quite understand. So this is an example here. This is what I would call a rattle rock. It's musical. It's got little pieces of clay inside, but the surface of it I actually embedded with couscous, and then that burnt out, and then I rubbed underglaze oxides into the sort of pits that were created by the couscous. Then I wiped that away, and then I just kind of kept firing the surface. So what you have on most of these pieces is probably a combination of anywhere between like 3 and 10 glazes. And yeah, so I think what I've been really loving is the studio thing, and I think that this show probably reflects that. When I work quickly and site specifically in different cities, I only get one shot, and then I've loved that, and I love the fact that I can't revisit work, but this was an opportunity to think about that, and to consider that way of working. So for example, this piece was made in 2017 in Texas, where I now live. I was living in New York for about 10 years before I moved down. And some of these pieces over here were made a couple of years ago and were literally inserted into the ground in Austin. So you kind of have these different time scales going on. And the floor is composed, so we've kind of got like bigger, fuller, rounder pieces, and it kind of like teeters down to like very, very flat pieces. And I wanted to make a landscape for people to walk through. So I think a lot about the architecture, a lot about the light, a lot about the space, and I've responded to the height of the space in my previous exhibitions. So I've gone floor to ceiling, and when I was thinking about the work for this, I was thinking about like, how do I make a show that's kind of like really simple, but still kind of like is dominant in the space, or like assertive in the space. So I think a lot about work. I never want my work to feel passive, and I always want my work to feel like something that people are invited to explore and to touch and to kind of find out what's going on for themselves. And so the format of this is like, it's a grid. It's like 5 by 5. It's a very formal layout. And I worked pretty hard on the spacing. I wanted it to feel intimate, but I wanted it to feel open enough for people to want to explore. Because you certainly can't see the work if you're just on the edge. You can walk around it and you can walk through it. So, yeah, we literally have a landscape here. And a lot of my work is like, it's kind of like always referencing the outside and the sidewalk and the street and detritus and stuff we see and incidental moments and localized detail and all of that. So something that I've been able to include, even though I wasn't like working outside, and for other exhibitions at Cooper Cole, I have worked outside. I've put work out on the train tracks. I've put work on an island, which is still there, and one day I'll retrieve it and maybe put it into the gallery, but I'd like to wait at least a decade before I do that. But the outside is present in this exhibition through my use of glass. So I find glass on the street just when I'm walking around. Broken bottles. Sometimes I find it in the dirt, like really old things in the dirt, and that glass is like super beautiful to fire. But so what I do is I just make these, I kind of think of them as puddles. I call them puddles, but that's like too literal. I think they're better if they're thought of as sculptures. But this glass I found in San Antonio, kind of like quite close to my studio. In fact, all of this glass is from Texas. And I just find this like forgotten about material. So I think it's forgotten about because it's like no one wants it. So I don't really feel like I'm using like a really precious natural resource. I feel like I'm using something that people just don't care about and don't want. I'm really not into like taking rocks and stuff from spaces or shells. I really like don't like that at all. But when I collect glass from spaces that aren't my own, I feel like I'm actually like cleaning it. So we have like, we just have this like, basically this body of work that's just got two materials. It's clay and it's glass. And it's got glaze, but glaze is kind of like glass. So we've just got like two materials really. And these are these different responses to it. So this is actually one of my favorite ones. And I think the reason I've thought about this one a lot is because I think I like that you can like see that the glass gets bigger. So when it's in the kiln, it kind of like expands and then shrinks. So it's tidal. So there's a lot of like mimicking of things that actually happen within these objects. But this is just glass and clay, and it's like a whole kind of universe. And the clay's super rough, and you can see my fingers, and you can see my handprints. I'm not like heavily crafting these things. In 2010, I came to Canada for the very first time, and I went to Banff, where I did a residency with Jeffrey Farmer and a whole lot of really cool artists that I'm still friends with. And when I was in Banff, I was in the ceramic department, and I had dabbled with clay. My father is a potter. We grew up with clay. There was a kiln on the property on the west coast of where I grew up. But I hadn't really been getting my hands stuck into it. I was more like painting words on different things. So when I was in Banff, I was in the ceramic department because they just kind of allocated me the studio there. And I remember talking to Ed, the technician, and he said that when clay is fired, it just becomes a rock again. So through the process of time and heat, you know, like rock breaks down into clay, and then when you fire it, you're just like reversing this process. So I was like, wait, what? Like clay's a rock? And then I started making rocks out of clay. And at the time they were like pretty little and pretty rudimentary, and they still are actually. But in the what, like 15 years or 14 years since I was there, I've kept making these ceramic rocks. I made a huge body of ceramic rocks during my residency on Fogo Island in 2012, and that felt like a pretty meaningful project to create. I worked with a local geologist, and I grouped the rocks according to different logic, like my own logic. It's probably more personal and social. But anyway, so I've been making rocks for a long time, and I've also been making ceramic wind chimes for a long time. And I've been making, for the last couple of years, I've been making this kind of what I call rattle rocks. And that's because on the ranch where I was living in Texas, I actually found these rattling geodes. So you'd find a rock and you could just rattle it. And I thought, well, why haven't I done that? And look, these aren't original. This isn't my idea. A lot of ceramic people and artists have done stuff with rattles inside of things. So it's not original. But when I was making work for the show, so these pieces are the most recent, but I just like this idea that building upon, I guess, my history and my connection to Canada and ceramic rocks, it made a lot of sense to keep making them. So the thing is, the reason I'm interested in them is because it's an invitation for people to do more with the work, and it's an invitation for the work to kind of always feel like it's in motion. So for me, it would be a sadness if I made work that didn't stay relevant, if it became invisible somehow. And it's fine to be invisible, but if I'm making things, I want people to feel like they can touch them. I don't want them to feel like they're just going to gather dust. So this is an invitation for people to do something with the work. Or do nothing, but to know that that potential is there to interact. So here we are in the downstairs gallery, and this was the space actually where I first had my exhibition at Cooper Cole. So I'm really attached to this space, and it's one of my favourite gallery spaces of all time for whatever reason. And with this exhibition, I've wanted it to feel dense, but I never really want to fill the space. I often think, just in general, a lot of exhibitions just have too much stuff. I use empty space as much as I use the space. I want to ignore it, I want to stay away from it, and I want to stay focused. It's just something I have done with my work for a long time. But down here in the basement, we have 2 works and the mural works. And again, they're in clay with glass and a lot of different glazing. And I was pretty surprised by this piece, because first time it came out, came out of the kiln, I thought, oh, that's, it's pretty interesting. But I just kept getting pulled along, thinking, oh, it needs more, it needs more, it needs more. So I just kept firing it, and not all at the same time. Some pieces were barely fired, and some, like this one, I just kept putting more and more glass on. So these little white things are actually little pieces of glass that just react differently from other pieces of glass. I really love this one. So I just kept building and building and building, and adding these different ash glazes, which really contrasted with this kind of matte patina that I was using. But the surface, in terms of mark making, it's just all my fingernails. So I push my finger in, I scratch it, and so there's this tension between when you've got wet clay in front of you, you really want to get into it, right? And sometimes it's, for me, I have to remind myself to be really restrained, and that just by scratching it, that's enough. The contrasting work is this one, which I don't even know if I want to share this or not, but like I made it with my feet, you know, like this is my feet. There's still like hands and stuff in it, but I was like, I mean, I think it's fine to share how things are made. But yeah, so I just was like stepping on the clay, and that was how the mark making came. And I think orange is a tough colour. It kind of, I never really feel that happy with it. But with this one, it's probably got maybe like 8 or 9 different types of orange glaze. Some of them I've made myself and some of them are commercial. So I just kind of kept adding and kept adding and kept adding, because I feel like the more you add, actually, again, like the more you kind of lose it and it becomes something else. It becomes its own thing, like outside of my control. Yeah.